We're live on the HawksZone Rundown. Mookie, man, we just felt like we had you on because we did just have you on. We were joking, saying, hey, man, probably going to have an emergency pod. And I was like, man, it better not be for DK Metcalf. So I don't know if I jinxed it, but here we are. Man, I think it might be, about 48 hours. We're here sitting here. Supposed to be a Tyler tribute today. That was kind of Bryce and I were going to be like, hey, let's just come on, do a Tyler tribute. But, like we said, this time of the year, man, so much to talk about. Glad you came on the show, man, because we're going to, talk about Tyler. We're going to really dive into the DK, man. So, guys, flood your comments. Get him in here. We're going to get to Q&As. Want to hear your guys' thoughts of DK and Tyler. Whole new looking receiving core going into the next year. I mean, DK's still on the roster, but, we shall see. So, all that coming up other side.
So y'all can sit here and ask me all the questions y'all want to.
Don't you ever talk about me!
Yeah, let's go. It's go time, baby.
Here comes Gino. Steps up, takes that shot to the end zone. It is Metcalf. 20.
I'm just about that action, boss.
You about to go get it. You just like to do it.
That's what it is.
Off me.
Nobody in the world can do it.
Are you kidding me? Trying to do that. Pass is caught back in. Jackson Smith is Jigba. The circus music rolls in. Throw it forward. Oh my goodness, he caught it. By Leonard Williams.
This is the HawksZone Rundown with your hosts, Ryan and Bryce.
Guys, you're listening live to the HawksZone Rundown. We got Mookie Alexander back with us. Mookie, we appreciate you coming on, man. We got a lot to talk about. This was going to be a shorter pod. I mean, it's not going to be a long pod. We got just a few more things to talk about. So, first of all, appreciate you coming on, joining us 48 hours after we covered a lot on Pulse of the Hawks there.
Yeah, fate works in mysterious ways. I wasn't supposed to be home for much of the day. And it's a good thing I've been home all day because, boy, did the dam burst with news. I mean, we probably won't have a lot of time to talk about the Ernest Jones, the surgery you just had. But undoubtedly, the story of the day is the Metcalf trade. But it wouldn't have been the story of the day if Lockett was released on another day. I mean, it's so unfortunate that these two things happen like a half hour, an hour apart. But interesting times for the Seahawks. And hey, I guess every once in a while you got to have some drama with the Seahawks and a wide receiver. We had it with Joey Galloway a couple decades back. We might as well have it again. The 2.0 version, the very fast wide receiver who is on his way out, seemingly disgruntled and could end up on another team soon.
Yeah, it's definitely not the way I imagine the Seahawks envisioned today going. Today, they were supposed to be Tyler's day. This was supposed to be us, thinking about all the great moments we've had with Tyler Lockett, the guy he is on and off the field and just such a great Seahawk he's been. And then to, have that come out and we were all bracing for it. We all kind of knew it was coming. And then to have it basically shadowed and basically kind of taken away Tyler's moment comes in DK with his, I want to trade out of Seattle. And to me, that news didn't need to come. It could have came tomorrow. It could have came on Friday. Like, let Tyler have his day. He's earned that day. And to have this come out at the same time and basically, like Ryan said earlier, we were going to do a Tyler tribute show today, which we'll still do. But now we've also got to talk about this other factor in the DK Metcalf situation. And, the one person in this whole situation, like that good, Prince of Bel-Air meme is Jackson Smith and Jigba standing in a very empty room all of a sudden because it went from being the three of them to now just him being the only one that's really going to potentially be there.
Yeah, isn't that something that we said on Pulse of the Hawks on Monday? It's like, okay, we expected Lockett to be let go, and financially it makes sense. It's just sentimentally, emotionally, we're so attached to Tyler because he's been so great for the team and the city and all that. But not having Metcalf or Lockett potentially in 2025, that creates a significant need on the offensive side of the ball. And this also doesn't even include the fact that we're not done with the Geno Smith story. So like there are so many ways that this story could go as far as the future of the offense in general. Like, I'm not too worried about what happens on the defensive side of the ball. I think I can trust Mike McDonald on that front to know who he wants and the improvements they'll make. But on offense, Lockett gone is one thing, but Metcalf potentially being dealt, that is a different story because that affects so many things. It affects this roster right now. it certainly is going to affect their draft plans if he gets traded before the draft. And suppose that this drags out until after the draft and he's still on this team in June or July. I mean, that can also change the financial ramifications too, because the cap savings is different if he's post June 1st traded compared to if he's traded prior to June 1st. So the can of worms has been opened up, and we are at this point where there are a lot of fans, usually on the interwebs here, that have wanted DK gone for a bit. And, well, it seems like you're about to get your wish. And it's not a case of the Seahawks absolutely want to go out of their way to trade DK. It's DK is the one submitting this request. The fact that it leaked so quickly after the Lockett story, I know it's business, and it's really unfortunate. I don't know if it had any malicious intent, but you couldn't make that up. It was almost like, didn't Russ and Bobby, wasn't Bobby's release the same day as Russ's trade?
Yeah.
So
I think,
yeah. So this is kind of like the sequel to it.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I don't put too much weight into that. 'Cause first of all, I don't blame DK for that. I mean, that's his whole camp, right? Whoever leaked that. Like you said, so many things are happening with, if they had a meeting yesterday or whatever, and the timing's the timing, right? I mean, if they could have released Tyler at the same time they released all the other guys, and then this would have been a non-story. But looking at it, and on DK's side, I mean, to me, this just has to come down to money. Like are the Seahawks hesitant to pay him to where they think he is? Like, he's not. We know he's not Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, that tier. He's below it. He's our number one guy, but the Seahawks are probably looking at it like, you know what? Yeah, he's durable. Yeah, he's productive, but we got to spend a lot of money. So, I mean, I look at it like, yeah, it has to come down to that. You can talk about the other things, whether it's Mike McDonald, this and that, but if the money's there, I don't see why he wouldn't. And then you look at the comments, like the contender thing. And I'm not making excuses, but you know what? Sometimes things just run its course. If he might look at it too, hey, look, if I'm not going to get paid, if I'm not going to get the dollar I want, I did 3 years under, 2 years under, Shane Waldron, which, like Mookie, we were talking earlier, like the year before was a disaster. Then Grubb was a disaster. So, you're talking about a guy, he went stretches without seeing a football. Maybe he just wants to change the scenery. He's looking at it like, you know what? Maybe things just won't click with Gino and myself, especially if the dollar's not there, so trade me to a contender, maybe look, he hasn't spoke publicly, so maybe that could be taken out of context. Maybe he's just saying, I want to be traded to a contender, not that Seattle isn't one. I don't know all that. Maybe someone else can shed some light on that, but and so on my end, man, like, if we make a move, which we probably will, then we can talk about do we revisit that Packer rumor, because you know what, maybe change is necessary on both ends when you look at it. Like Tyler's gone, DK's gone, JSN taking the reins. I mean, it's gonna be a completely different receiving room now. Maybe it's a blessing in disguise. And I love DK. I mean, two days ago we were on here, I just said, hey, he's our guy. Like I said it, he's our guy, man. Like, let's go. But this is just the way it goes, man. So, now it's about moving forward and seeing what, potentially can we get in return for DK.
Well, the one thing I'm going to say is, I want to give Corbin Smith some credit here. Corbin's actually even in our chat, but me and Mookie were talking earlier about it. Like his reporting that he did at the combine, now you can see the validity to it. Like, they may not have been openly shopping DK Metcalf at the combine, but there was some smoke to this, and there's now fire to this. And that's what good reporters do. They find nuggets like that, and they elaborate on them, and they follow their gut and their sources that they have. And I think this just proves that, all the backlash Corbin got for that, because some fans didn't want to hear it, that this may be an outcome. Now there's some validity to it, to exactly what Corbin's talking about. Now we can see that, hey, just because you may not like what's being said doesn't mean it's not true, and that doesn't give you the right to go and bash somebody. That's my one point I want to make, because I feel that Corbin got unfairly, basically prosecuted on Twitter and social media for doing his job. And he does a good job at what he does. He's a credentialed reporter with the Seahawks. He's not going to throw out some random thing just for clickbait, as some people would want to put it down as. But back to the DK side of it, like, I think you're right, Ryan. I think it does come down to money. I think it does come down to maybe a change of scenery, but it's so interesting to me because now your whole offense is clearly in a pivot.
Oh yeah.
You've got this new offensive coordinator coming in and this whole staff, and with the intention, because we listened to Mike McDonald say at Kubiak's press conference, hey, one of the first questions we asked all these OCs is how are you going to maximize 14? Well, now you've got 14 not wanting to be in the building anymore. And I don't think this is a situation where it's like Brandon Ayuk necessarily, and it can be walked back. I think from what I've heard that this is a situation where it's very much going to a point of a trade. And I really do believe that the Seahawks are going to move off of DK, and DK is going to go, and he's going to go somewhere potentially get his money that he wants. But we saw what happened the last time a player in Seattle did that, in Russell, and he wanted, because he didn't feel he was being used right, and he wanted to go, and he wanted to pivot, and he wanted to go somewhere else where he could be the guy. And this hasn't worked out well for Russ. I don't know how this works out for DK, because I think DK views himself as a top 5 guy. I've never viewed DK Metcalf as a top 5 receiver. I think he's a top good receiver in the NFL, but I don't think he's in the same category as Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase.
Well, few are,
but that's the money that he's now asking for in that range, that $30 million, right?
Yeah, but
so if you're going to pay a guy at 27 to do that, you have to see the dividend and the payback coming back to you as an organization. I just don't think Seattle, like to your point, Ryan, I don't think they view it that way. They view it more as, hey, we've got this young guy in JSN. Maybe we steer into getting another receiver that is a similar, build and fits the offense a similar way as JSN, and we pivot off of DK.
Well, when was the last time, they tossed out big money to receivers? Even the Super Bowl run, Deion Sanders called them a bunch of pedestrian receivers. That really got Doug Baldwin fired up, right? But you look at that, and they look at that. John said, "Hey, maybe we can win like that. We don't need to. We can pivot to top 5 defense, running the football. We don't need to pay, like to your point, $30 million a year, and win like that. Look at the receivers they won the Super Bowls with and went back to back with, right? I love Doug Baldwin, but you look at the Jermaine Curses and guys like that, it wasn't like bring in huge money receivers. So as much as I love DK, they probably had a line in the sand. Mookie, what do you think?
Well, I would also add that Super Bowl team did trade a first-round pick for Percy Harvin, and extended him, and they still had Golden Tate on his rookie deal. And this was back in the olden days when the CBA hadn't been adjusted, so he was a 2010 pick. And then they ended up not keeping Tate, and I think that was in part because of the Harvin move. They also had Sidney Rice, and he wasn't there for the Super Bowl. He tore his ACL. They put in quite a bit of investment at the receiver position, but it just so happened that Harvin got hurt for much of the year. Sidney blew out his ACL. Wasn't really performing all that well prior to that, and he was a big money signing for John and Pete at the time in 2011. They spent quite a bit on the offense that season with just between him, Zach Miller, and the really terrible.
I forgot about Sidney, actually, to be honest with you. Because like you said, he got hurt, and then he just didn't want to live up to what they paid him. But because they brought him.
So I can see the side of not wanting to pay Metcalf elite wide receiver money, because even though I like Metcalf and as polarizing a figure as he is, he's not. There are some things in his game that prevent him from being in that upper echelon of receivers, particularly, and I've said this on Monday's show, his ability to win contested catches above the rim. Essentially, he is a 6'4", 200 some odd pound athletic beast who very often will not play that way in certain situations. And I'm talking about, can you box out your man effectively? Can you win those jump balls? Just essentially moss somebody. And he doesn't do that a whole lot historically, but he does provide, or has provided, a lot of value to the Seahawks offense over the years, particularly as the speedy guy, the big speedy guy who commands double teams like nobody else on the roster can or could. And he can be a yards after catch guy if you give him a running start. So there was still quite a bit of value in Metcalf as occasional possession receiver, but also a guy who could stretch the field in ways that's, I know JSN had a lot more explosive plays in the second half of the season, but once he's the guy and defense is going to key in on him, then he's really going to have to take a leap upon another leap. So as far as what the Seahawks do at the receiver position, obviously the draft is going to be our future mock drafts have just changed drastically just off of this, on the assumption that Metcalf is going to be dealt. And then from DK's side, I think that he can still be very productive, and in fact maybe reaches his full potential or something close to it in an offense where there's another 1A type receiver alongside him, or there's a more pass heavy offense. I'm sure if he was in Kansas City's offense and the Chiefs fixed their offensive line, he'd be the deep threat that Kansas City has kind of lacked over the last couple of seasons, and they would get Rashee Rice back. So that would be a replenished receiving group. If he went to Atlanta, for example, and I said this before we went on air, that you could have Michael Penix and his rocket arm throw into Drake London and DK Metcalf. I don't know if the financials would work out. The Chargers might be of interest because other than Ladd McConkey, that's a pretty bad receiving group. And I know Corbin was is in the chat, but he had suggested this is just a pure like fantasy thing. Give up a second. The Chargers would give up a second rounder, maybe throw in Quentin Johnston. And Quentin Johnston did visit the Seahawks when he was still a college prospect, but there's no part of me that wants QJ. He is basically the things that frustrate us about DK minus the penalties, but multiply the drops by 50 and also his inability to consistently box out guys. So I don't think he's got that kind of upside. But this really is it was a bombshell report to have it happen this way. Like if Metcalf were to be traded, I would have thought, okay, the Seahawks just found an offer they couldn't refuse, and DK didn't request a trade. But now that it's gotten to this point, well, we might be at the point of no return.
Yeah, and that was one thing. Like I heard Ian Rappaport say today when he was talking about it on their Insider show that like when you get a point when a team is shopping a player and the player doesn't come out and say he wants a trade, or vice versa, the player says, hey, I want to trade, and the team goes, no, like Myles Garrett with Cleveland. No, we're not trading Myles Garrett. Like we're hanging on to him. Usually something sometimes gets worked out more times than not. But he said when you deal with a situation where a player requests a trade and then the team in a statement that goes out kind of in a way says, yeah, and we're going to explore it, that's usually your signal that something is moving more towards this player's not going to be on the team coming forward into the new season. I look at it and I agree with you, Mookie. Like there were things DK did that were really, really good and brought new things. You think of the year he had with Brian Schottenheimer in 2020 when it was chuck the ball down the field to DK Metcalf and he was going out and, at his best statistical season. But I think in some of the things that they want to do in this Kubiak offense, and I know they were, talked about, hey, we want to make 14 a focal point of it. There's things in this offense where DK's skill set isn't necessarily the best suited for it in the timing routes and things like that. Like DK is a deep post, hook. Like his best routes are the ones he came into the NFL really running from college. He has developed some of his skill set for sure. But I think Seattle looks at it and goes, it's not worth $30 million. And the other point of this too is I think this might also signal a drastic change in Seattle's allocation of money. They might now be ready to go in the direction of, hey, we're going to allocate to the trenches. We're going to build an O-line. We can stop allocating to necessarily skill positions in a certain way and really lean into, their trenches and the run game and all those type of things. The other part for this, and I know, Mookie, we talked about a little bit off air, was how does this affect Geno Smith and his contract extension now? Because moving off DK is moving off a win now piece. Tyler's now gone. Is this what, Ryan and you and me have talked about it as well, is this a situation now where you take one step back or two steps back potentially to try and take 3 or 4 steps forward and set this team up for the long term in a better way? Those are kind of the things I wonder now with the Geno conversation.
Well, I mean, the thing that's the baffling thing about me though, like you got to know if you're Schneider and Camp, like he's probably going to want a number. Like that he thinks he's that alpha dog. Like he might not be that Justin Jefferson, but he's got to think like I'm right there. Like I'm I'm AJ Brown territory. So that there's got to be a number in his head. So if you're in a win now, and like you said, this is going to be a focal point, like Kubiak and Mike McDonald, 14 is going to be like, we're going to make sure this guy's a focal point of this offense in the interviews. How are you going to utilize 14? Like Clint had some awesome theory. Okay, let's go. So that's what's confusing. So, it'd be nice to be in that meeting. just to see exactly what was going on, because you got to think, like, were they that far apart? Because if you're close, usually it'll get worked out a little later on down the line, whatever. So unless, I mean, that's the thing, like, if unless they were just so far apart that it threw John and guys off, like, really, you want that much, like that? And maybe then he's like he gets pissed off, like, what do you? Of course. And look at the system that I've been in. I was with a college OC last year. I was with Shane Waldron, who went stretches and games without giving me a football. There was times when I was watching when Shane was here, and I was legit watching games saying, I wonder if this guy wants out. I said that. And when Grubb came in, he was like making it an emphasis, like, I'm getting him the ball, right? The first half of the season is like force feeding him. So you're like, okay. But in Shane's deal, dude, like, I was just like, you got to get this guy the ball. You can't wait till 3 minutes left in the fourth quarter. I was surprised that DK kept his composure as much as he did. And I always said that's where some of the frustration came in, when the teams like San Francisco would try to get under his skin. He never got a football. So you're thinking, I'm dying to get a ball. Give me a ball. Give me a ball. Teams are getting under him. I mean, I hate people bring up the dumb penalties. Look, this guy is a win now piece. So yeah, like you said, what's the plan? Do you go out, do you get another veteran that you don't spend as much? It's not going to cost you as much, and you draft a guy. I mean, there's going to be a lot of interesting things to see. I mean, guys, first of all, he's still on this roster, but like you said, Bryce, it's pretty clear the way they've both been talking. Like, a deal, probably will get done. To Mookie's point, when will that happen because of money issues? But yeah, that's just the interesting thing, because you looked at, we talked about on Pulse of the Hawks, like, you're a 10-win team. This division's for the taking. You have a focal point here now. Like, extend them, push the money, save the money, and let's go. Build it up, right? Sign a center. Bryce, we still were thinking, hey, you can extend this guy and still go get a center in free agency and then work the draft. So we weren't just saying, okay, if you extend both guys, Geno, DK, like, man, we're screwed again. Like, we were like, no, they can allocate the money where we can still focus and build this O-line up properly. So it's, I mean, maybe more is going to come out as we come along here, right? But, maybe we'll really find out the reasoning. But, I mean, I don't know. What else? What would you guys take on that?
I honestly think, I don't know if I don't think this gets resolved. I think Seattle and DK are going to a separation. I think they're going to pivot, and I think they're going to go in a different way. And, I was just looking through a lot of the comments that are coming in, and we'll get to them, guys. I promise you we will get to them. A lot of people saying, like, what do you do at receiver now? Like, you've let go of Tyler. You got JSN. Bobo's still there. So all the more Bobo are really going to get more Bobo.
Number 2 receiver.
He's currently right now. Like, DK's still on the roster, but he's probably not going to be. Jake Bobo now becomes your number 2. I think all of a sudden, all the mock drafts I've done, that I'll do tomorrow night, all of a sudden receiver jumps that priority list. And I think that's why you saw even in the, in Corbin's reporting that he did, saying that, is it a Romeo Dobbs or a young receiver coming back with a pick? They need to bring somebody in and it's not going to be a veteran receiver that is, older and is going to come in and, take up cap. They're going to go with somebody young that they think fits their system, that if they draft somebody, then they're getting 2 young receivers for the DK Metcalf trade. It'll be an interesting saga. But the thing is like, I don't think this one potentially plays all the way out to draft night like Frank Clark. I think there's going to be a lot more buzz around DK.
Yeah.
And I think there's going to be a lot more teams that they miss out on any of the free agent receivers and go, I don't have a number 1. Okay, I'm calling Seattle, and we're going to make a significant offer to Seattle to go get DK.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it would be something if Kansas City, by the way, calls on Metcalf, because I believe it is through the Frank Clark trade that Seattle had an extra pick to kick around, and through a series of events was able to trade back into the second to get DK. But we also have to consider that historically, John has not been very willing to give out third contracts. So I'm going to go rookie contract plus first extension, second extension. So he's not been very willing to give out second extensions on the offensive side of the ball. Now, that isn't to say we've had a ton of players who've justified that, but still, he's given it to Russ. And even that had some bumps just from the second extension. And he certainly wasn't going to give one more. And he was evidently right in not doing that and sending him his merry way. Then there's Tyler Lockett. So he got a second extension, and then that's it among the draft picks. And then if you want to go to the undrafted route, then there's Doug Baldwin. And unfortunately, he didn't make it out of his second extension. He had a myriad of injuries and had to retire, which, by the way, is why Seattle had to go draft DK Metcalf, because Baldwin couldn't medically cut it. So they had to have Lockett and then somebody else to step up to the plate because they didn't have a lot of depth. But on defense, they've had no issue giving multiple extensions to the draft picks. Cam, well, with the holdout fully acknowledged, but Cam, Earl, Sherm, they all got their extensions. And then KJ and Bobby also got theirs too. So there has been that imbalance over the years. Whereas on the offensive side of the ball, it's not been all that common for them to even give a first extension. Look at what's happened to the offensive line. And that Justin Britt, 15 years into the John Schneider era, is the only Seahawks offensive lineman that they have drafted who's gotten an extension beyond his rookie deal. So that is a pretty damning thing. So that might factor into the decision to say, okay, we're going to play hardball with Metcalf. If he doesn't accept, then we move on. Now, to me, there's an argument that's been made that, hey, if Metcalf, if Seattle's going to run the ball more, they're going to be a run first, defense first team, then they won't need all that money tied up to a receiver. Well, the Philadelphia Eagles just won the Super Bowl, and they are paying AJ Brown elite money, and he is better than Metcalf, of course, but they're also paying Devontae Smith at least $25 million a year. But if you notice Howie Roseman and the way he handles contracts, he likes to push the cap hits way, way back. And that's not something that Schneider has been willing to do. Now, I fully acknowledge that the Eagles have got their trenches, but I don't think it's an either or thing in terms of you either pay the receiver or you pay the offensive lineman. That, to me, is a bad excuse for the way that the Seahawks have treated this offensive line for years. Certainly in 2016 and 2017, when they didn't have a super rich receiving core, money was not the reason why they couldn't just sign, why they ended up signing Luke Jokel or Jamarcus Webb or a host of all the worst offensive linemen we could think of. So if they are going to move on from Metcalf, open up even more cap space, obviously, they're going to have to find the replacements through free agency and through the draft, or even trade Rashid Shaheed. You want to go reunite with Kubiak? Because I know you do one thing other than punt returning, and is catch 60-yard passes all the time. But beyond what they do with the receiving group at the draft and in free agency and possibly trade, that money better be allocated quite significantly to the trenches. Otherwise, I think we're all going to be just rolling our eyes once again at John Schneider. Like, it's a risk. We have to acknowledge this is always potentially in the cards that they will move on from DK, not necessarily in this dramatic way. But to see it play out this way, I think was kind of like pulling it out, just pulling it out of the hat, so to speak. But the Geno thing is going to be fascinating, because if they also don't keep Geno, that tells you everything you need to know as far as what we should expect for 2025, because the odds of rookie quarterback whom they draft, and then whomever gets signed in free agency, whoever gets drafted to the wide receiver spot, historically speaking, that does not lead to deep playoff runs. Jaden Daniels and what the Washington Commanders did is an anomaly for a reason. We don't see that very often. So if those two receivers are gone, meaning DK in addition to Tyler, and Geno's gone, then more likely than not, 2025 is going to be the step back year as the expectation, and anything else above that is a bonus.
Well, I mean, with DK out the door, we keep saying out the door, but if he's gone, I mean, that's a step back right there, right? I mean, that's not maybe a 4 or 5 win team step back, but you got to be foolish to think that, oh yeah, we'll just figure it out another way and win 10 games, unless this defense just explodes, right? Unless they just become like a top 3 defense. But offensively, as much as there's a reason Grubb was one and done, but I mean, let's not sugarcoat it. That those are big shoes to fill. Whether you think he's worth $30 million a year, whatever. JSN had a breakout, but he also had DK Metcalf on the team, right? So, like you said, now you're the guy, right? That's what's. I wouldn't call him a large group of the fan base, but a loud part of the fan base were what they wanted. JSN could be our number one guy now. We don't need DK Metcalf. Well, you might see what that's like. So that is going to be interesting, because now if you sign Geno, you sit here and say, I mean, there's a lot to do with the roster still, but as it stands right now, you're worse than you were, right? So yes, we'll get another receiver in here, but let's not. We can talk about. I mean, look, AJ Brown's in a good situation, right? He's in a really good situation. I mean, you put DK in Philly, and flip flop him. It'd be interesting to see how he does. What AJ Brown's doing. I mean, Philly is a damn good organization, and the way they do everything right. And so, I mean, I don't know how far away is he from an AJ Brown. I don't think he's that far away. So I think he's he's right there. No, he's not the Chase and Jeffersons. I kind of have AJ Brown a little lower than those guys, but yeah, a damn good receiver, and DK is. So I just think, what is this going to look like for the Seahawks moving forward? You say, yeah, if Geno's gone, I throw it to you guys. Is that now a decision now that they're thinking about, that really what they weren't thinking about a couple days ago? And we weren't either. We thought, hey, maybe he'll ride, maybe DK. The scenario was more like they'll probably extend him. He gets to 30, he's gone. You're not getting another, you know what I mean? Like 2 to 3 year deal extension. That's what we all thought. And same with Geno, a couple years. Now that this just came on, and you're losing 2/3 of your starting receivers, I mean, is John maybe thinking, man, I got a decision to make which way I want to go here? Like, Bryce, what do you think?
So it's interesting you bring up John. We all talked about how important this offseason was for John Schneider.
Right.
And his whole, how is this going to go? A lot of people are saying John's on the hot seat, or his seat's getting warm. Depending on how this now, with the DK component of this and this trade, and if they do trade DK, it's going to see a very interesting, how does John Schneider's rest of his offseason go? How does the draft and how does his team do? Because I've said it numerous times on different shows, there was a situation with the Mariners, and I know we have a lot of Mariners fans in here that are going to hate this, but when Jerry DiPoto took over the Mariners, he had to take the roster that he had been gifted and try and win with it. I think that's what you saw last year in a way with Mike McDonald coming in, was a lot of it was Pete Carroll and John's construction. It was their brainchild together. I think what you might be seeing now is the real pivot to the Mike McDonald philosophy and how John Schneider and Mike McDonald are going to work together. And I think you're seeing this move to a physical team. And I get DK's physical, but I mean in the same mindset of what you look at what Baltimore and Michigan, where he's coached both times and had a lot of successes. They weren't known for their outside skill receivers. They were known for their running game, their offensive line, and their defense. That's what they were known for. That's what they're still known for. And I think that's maybe where this pivot is going now, because the money's not going to line up the way that DK wanted it to. And I think for how Seattle wanted to construct their current cap going forward. I will say I think there's a bigger gap than maybe you think, Ryan, with AJ Brown and DK Metcalf. That's just my own opinion of it. I will say DK is a good receiver. He is a higher good receiver. He's not just average. He's above average, 100%. He's good. I just don't put him in that elite category. And when I think of $30 million for me, I was okay if DK wanted anywhere between 27 and 29. But once we get to 30 and above, that's where I'm going, I don't know about that allocation of the funds there for a guy that's aging, and you don't know how he's going to physically be at 30 or getting close to that. Sorry. So it'll be interesting to see how John handles this. It's really, John's putting a lot of pressure on himself now to get this right. Mookie, what are your thoughts?
Something that's kind of been noodling in my head is, and I see a comment here, is DK even a top 10 wide receiver in the NFL? I would say not, but I would put him in the at least top 20. And when you consider how many wide receivers there are on an NFL roster, top 20 is still really, really, really good. Now, $30 million a year right now, I think we have to contextualize that this cap keeps going up by 9-10%. And I have to bring up Philadelphia again. When they push their cap hits like 3-4 years down the road, I mean, the cap hits are not going to look as bad if the salary cap continues to increase at this rate. We're probably going to have like a $300 million cap next year at this rate. So $30 million is going to go from above 10% of the cap to about 10 or even less than that. So that's just something to consider there with the math, to not always just look at the monetary value, but look at what it is as far as the percentage of the cap. So something that I was noodling in my head is, would Seattle look at some other teams' above them in the draft order. So they're in pick 18 right now. I don't know how many teams above higher up absolutely need a number 1 wide receiver, or even just a really good number 2 wide receiver. This could be one of the few times where we go, is it possible that Schneider would be looking to trade up? And to me, that would also tie into what they do with Geno. So let's say, and I don't have the draft order right in front of me, but let's say that it's like the Raiders or some team like on the 7th through 11th range, and they want Metcalf, and they're willing to swap spots in the draft order but stay within the top 20 of the draft. Would Seattle do that? Or would Seattle even entertain that offer? Because otherwise, I don't think Metcalf in and of it in itself, just having Metcalf would result in a first-round pick for them. I don't think it would. It would have to be a pick swap. Anything else, I feel like his ceiling would be a second-round pick because of the season that he just had, which was a decent season, but far from his best and also his most injured. I don't think his value is at its absolute peak. Keeping in mind, his age is a different story. At 27, his best year should still be ahead of him. But I don't think that he's going to be anything but a second-round pick, earlier to mid-second-round pick. There will be a lot of teams interested, but I don't know if he's going to fetch anything like super high, especially in this current wide receiver market. Ayuk was on the block last year, and they didn't trade him, but Pittsburgh reportedly offered a second. And Ayuk had a phenomenal season the year before that. So not a lot of these top receivers, as we said on Monday, are going for high first-round picks or even mid-first-round picks. So at best, you could get maybe a late first from Kansas City or something. But other than that, it's going to be a second rounder and a third rounder or something in that neighborhood. So that's just kind of the nature of the beast for the Seahawks. And if that happens before the draft, you wonder, are they going to take that extra second or extra third rounder and package that for something else? I mean, we're in very fascinating territory here with this wide receiver group because, let's face it, Metcalf is one of the few tradable assets on this roster right now, and as in high-end day 1 or day 2 pick tradable assets.
Yeah. And I mean, and then if you're trading for him, you gotta, right now he's a 1 year guy, so you got to make sure that that extension is going to happen, right? And the fact that he's come out and said, now I want to be traded, I mean, that's got to hurt a little bit. And the reason why Seattle was so pissed off, I mean, I think they want to say it's because of Tyler, but I mean, you're leaking that information. So now, it hurts you a little bit, right? Because, okay, now you want to move this guy. You're not desperate, but teams know you can't have this guy back, unless, like Bryce, you said, like, unless there's some like makeup marriage, but
I don't know if you're going to get that, man.
I agree with you. And that's why I think a lot of teams think that too. So now maybe, I'm not saying you would have got a first, but instead of a second, maybe you're in third round territory. It's just, I think it does hurt you a little bit. I mean, maybe not as much because, like you said, he's a pretty tradable asset, but it doesn't help you, right? So
the one thing I'll say is if Seattle comes out of this with just like a third, then I think they've failed in some ways, and John Schneider has failed at understanding the value of DK, and you should have traded him 2 years ago if you were going to have that be the outcome of it, because it doesn't allocate. Like, you gave him a 2-year or 3-year deal 2 years ago, and he was 24 at that point, and you would have probably got a more significant return. If you walk away, and I was listening to Brian Nimhauser and Jeff Simmons talk about it today, a third-round pick is a failure in a lot of ways for Seattle with the value of what DK is. And like, I saw Josina Anderson put on here that she's heard teams are willing to give at the minimum a third-round pick. Okay, well, if that's the minimum and it's accompanied by a higher pick, then we have something to talk about. The thing, if I'm Seattle, is yes, I could see the appeal of this year getting another first-round pick, but I wonder if John's looking at getting another first-round pick in 2026. Which
Denver, come on down.
Yeah, exactly. Hey, Denver, let's do this again. Let's send you another one of our guys and see if we can fleece you out of a couple of your first-round picks again. But yeah, it's really going to be interesting to see. I think now receiver definitely obviously is a need for Seattle. But it'll be interesting to see how this all shakes up. It's going to make this offseason that much more interesting now. We thought it was going to be interesting. Now it's really heightened up. Now I think there's going to be a lot more national attention to what Seattle does than maybe initially was kind of anticipated for it. But let's get into some of these questions, guys. We've had a lot of comments in here. We got like 1,400 people watching, which is great. Thank you, everyone that's watching. And if you're on Twitter or whatever, populate your questions in here. They will show up in the chat. So let's go with this one right off the bat. MWN comes in with JSN flourished midseason when DK was out injured. So that is a true point. When DK did get injured this year, you did see JSN actually handle being the number one. Yes, Tyler was there, but Tyler still wasn't demanding the same coverage necessarily that he was 2 or 3 years ago. And JSN did do a pretty good job.
Yeah, well, with the caveat, the Buffalo game, nobody was getting open. And that looked like, see what happens when Metcalf leaves or doesn't play. There's just no serious deep threat. And then the Rams game happened, and it was just bombs away. Now, part of it is I don't think the Rams secondary is great, and there were some free plays that Smith and Jigba got to take advantage of. But even after that, against better teams, and even the 49ers game, if you're listening to Amador Lenore, 10 catches and over 100 yards in the 49ers win. So that's when Smith and Jigba emerged as he can attack at all three levels. Like he's getting downfield targets, like that crucial 4th down catch in the Jets game. He's your mid-level option. He can win in zone coverage. He's your 3rd down option. So, yeah, Smith and Jigba really upped his game significantly. And also the drops that he was having in the early portion of the season and a bit of last year. We didn't see that as much. So, got to be patient with guys like Smith and Jigba. He's really talented. But you always have to keep in mind that there are certain things that JSN can do that DK can't and vice versa. And JSN doesn't have DK Metcalf speed. So with Metcalf potentially on his way out, the team speed at wide receiver for Seattle is probably leaning toward below average. And if you're going to talk about a burner, then Derek Young, I guess, is fast, but he's fast. That's it. So you're going to have to adjust there and make defenses respect you over the top. Like Clint Kubiak can't have that offensive scheme and not have a speedy option at receiver who can take the top off of defense.
Yeah, I mean, you think they're going to – I mean, we are so early into this that Burner's got to be on the top of their list, right? So that's going to be the intriguing thing, who they replace him with. Whether it's through the draft, do they take a guy in the first round? There's just going to be so many interesting things. Do they do a trade? I just don't think this is a situation John Snyder wanted to be in. That's why I want to hear more about it, right? Because it's like, if we talk about money, like how were you that far apart that you couldn't make it work, that you couldn't extend him and just get creative? Because people, the thing is, we can sit around and argue all day, the fan base, about where he ranks. Is he top 10? Is he top 20? Well, he's number 22. AJ Brown's a little better than him. At the end of the day, he's your guy, right? He's on the Seattle Seahawks. We can't go get an AJ Brown like that. Justin Jefferson's not walking in our building, right? So it's like, this is who you have. Here's number 1A, and you got 1B over there. Do you want to take a step back? And that's the thing. So, maybe you have to overpay him like he's a top 12, but he's 20. Who cares? So now you're in this whole scramble, figure it out. How are we going to change this? Like, I don't think this is the offseason start John wanted to get into. So that's why for me that argument is such a moot point. Like, no, he's not Justin Jefferson, but I really don't care if he's 10 or 20 because he was your number one. And it's like when we look at the quarterback market, I know it's a little different, but I mean there's a market there where guys get overpaid all the time because it's a little easier to replace a receiver, but teams overpay quarterbacks every day because that's who they have. But as far as the DK thing is concerned, like, man, like, yeah, now that's just another thing on Schneider's list now that he's got to get this trade right. And then who do you replace him with? So,
here's the next one. So Sully comes in with, so do you all think the Seahawks pivot to taking a receiver in the NFL draft? I think 100%. I think it was one of the things they were probably going to take maybe in the mid rounds. Someone like a Jalen Noel, potentially in 2nd to 4th round area, kind of in that area, they might have taken a receiver because they didn't know they were going to be losing Tyler. They were going to need to add somebody else to this group. And now I think this becomes a higher pressing need. Does, the latest, I can't remember whose mock draft it was I saw. They had Seattle taking Marcus Golden at 18. Now does that become a reality, right?
Yeah,
Like, do they go and swing at the fences and take somebody like that? So yeah, I think definitely, Sully, that this is now a pivot point for Seattle. They're going to go get another receiver to inevitably fill out this this room.
I mean, you get good value, a rookie receiver that can, if you like him and you take him at 18, I mean, maybe that is the play, and then he's on a rookie contract, and then but again, let's see what they do in free agency too, right? But hey, you look at that Green Bay deal that was on the table too. You did have a receiver coming back. I know we debated like, wow, it's nobody, Dobbs or what, but I don't know. Now would you do that deal? Like, depending on the pick, right? Like, I don't know. I mean, it's just not a situation. We were just kind of like, yeah, whatever. Yeah, it's kind of a cool deal, but like we're gonna get this deal done with DK. So
we'll see. We got another one here from Crazy Rusty over on Twitter. So our Twitter chat's now coming through, which are good. He goes, Shane was the worst.
Shane
After the season we just had with Grubb, I will completely disagree there.
I will go with Grubb is definitely the worst. I
remember how many times we started reminiscing a little bit, like Shane wasn't that bad actually.
Yeah, Shane wasn't that bad actually. Like,
but in reality, he was bad. But
he was. It's just it wasn't as bad as what we had last year.
100%. I agree. Yeah.
Like, how funny is it? We all thought when Ryan Grubb showed up in Seattle, he was going to unlock DK like he had Roman Dunze at Washington. And now we're talking about a situation where Grubb's now down in Alabama and DK is likely going to be in a different color jersey next off the season. Like, who would have pictured that last year?
I mean, do you think a lot of frustration was setting in? Like I brought up earlier, you had those two C's. You talk about the headset, the frustration early on. Like he must have been frustrated all year with Grubb. Now I know he's out the door now, and Kubiak, but he's never played with Kubiak, right? Like, do you think some of it? He can look. I got a hard number. If not, I could take it or leave it. I could get out of here because I've been frustrated. Like we can't sit here and say that man has not been frustrated in this offense. Let Russ cook felt like a decade ago now. It really does. And it probably feels like a decade ago for him. I really feel like he's really been frustrated in this offense. Mookie, what do you think of that?
Certainly the first few weeks of the season, he was, well, not the Broncos game, but that stretch against Detroit, New England, and Miami, they were getting him involved. He had 100-yard games every week from weeks 2 through 4, and then he was quiet against the Giants, and then he had a big day against Atlanta, and then he got hurt. But yeah, the frustration was, I remember the 49ers game, but it's just natural frustration. I get the sense that the chemistry between Wilson and Metcalf was better than Geno and Metcalf.
Yes.
Let's be real here.
I've heard that.
I'm not going to debate current Geno and current Russ. I'm going to debate that Wilson at his best. We got we wrung out the last good years of Wilson, that his deep ball is still functional even today. And that's where Metcalf could really capitalize. Now, having the second safety back, as we're seeing the increase of cover 2 and then ways to prevent the explosives, that is, I think, impacted both Wilson and Metcalf separately. But Geno has a good arm, but I wouldn't call him like a ridiculously strong arm, throw it 55, 60 yards down the field and on a rope. He's not that kind of quarterback. And that may play into some of it. But, I mean, Geno he's seemingly having great chemistry with JSN right away. And maybe the Rams game was sort of a turning point in the way that Schneider viewed and the coaching staff viewed the Seahawks receiving group, is that they were kind of forced to see if JSN is ready for these extra snaps, and Geno had to target him more, and he handled the workload very well. They weren't just spamming useless screen passes. They were testing JSN in different parts of the field, but still, Metcalf, he was productive with Geno. This 2022 season was very good. He had 90 catches for 1,200 yards and 11 touchdowns or something like that. So it was there. You just got to give him time. And that all points back to the offensive line. But you also can't have it flip. You can't have a very, very good offensive line and then a bunch of receivers who don't get open. So
we got Megan, the Aussie 12, comes in. I think he's new to our channel, so appreciate it there, Megan. But is DK gone for sure, though?
I mean, I would say
90. I'd say it's in the 90% that he's gone. and that they're going to move off of. From things I've heard and people I've talked to, that's the consensus I've kind of gathered from people is there's a pretty substantial bridge burning that's occurred, and I think that this is going to move in the direction of DK won't be on the Seahawks roster in 2025. Now, that could always change, and it could roll back. I just think it would take a lot to roll that back.
Yeah, I think he's most likely gone. And just to circle back a couple minutes ago, I think, Bryce, you said that there was a mock draft saying Seattle would take Marcus Golden. Well, he's a retired pass rusher who it's Matthew Golden. I was going to say Marcus Golden was a pretty good player, but I think it'd be hard for him to re-enter the draft.
He would, yes.
But Matthew Golden is probably
Matthew Golden. Thank you.
Receiver. If they draft a receiver early, I think it's going to be second round.
Yeah.
Not the dreaded fourth round. We can't have another Gary Jennings. Nope. None of that.
Kevin Norwood. Oh,
Chris
gosh.
Durham.
Oh, jeez. Those are some bad moments for Seattle taking receivers in the fourth round. Here's one from Ian Victor, one of our members. I believe we're transitioning to being a physical team. The fans want everything now, but don't understand that this is a process. And then we got to do a draft party this year. We will definitely be doing a draft party this year, guys. That will be something we'll do on the channel. And Ian, to be honest, I agree with you. I think this is what Mike McDonald wants. You've heard him talk about the physicality and wanting to dictate terms to people. I think that's what they're leaning towards. And I think that's where you're going to see this team kind of go. So I'm in agreement with what Ian's saying here. I think this is the trend we're going to see in the transition we're going to see with this team.
Well, this transitioning. Sorry for interrupting, Ryan. This better be transitioning to being a physical team in the trenches because Metcalf is basically Seattle's only physical receiver.
Exactly.
That's what JSN is still working on being a good. Yeah, somebody in the comments 3D table saying, ironically, DK is probably the most physical offensive player. And yeah, sometimes he gets some penalties too, but he's also like one of the better run blockers on the team.
Yeah.
So like Metcalf can block. Bobo is a good blocker, of course, but he's not going to be getting a lot of targets. It's almost a giveaway when he's in the game and he's in motion. Everybody knows it's a running play. But JSN has had issues with blocking. He's getting a little bit better at it, but the tape is not great. And then Lockett's not, he can try, but there's just a physical mismatch to be had over the years. So if they're going to be a physical team, this also means having more physical threats at wide receiver and even at tight end, because we know that Noah Fant, somebody who could be also on his way out, he's also not the most physical blocking tight end you'll ever see. So the physical side of it is more than just the trenches, at least on the offensive side of the ball. You got to have your receivers and tight ends blocking effectively too. Look at the 49ers. I love Juwan Jennings. He's one of my favorite players in the league. He stepped up to be like a wide receiver too at times, but he can block the hell out of people. And then you've got George Kittle as just this freakish tight end who's a great receiver, but he's also a great blocker too. So it's all encompassing on that front.
Yeah, and the transition to a physical team aspect. I mean, it's not as if we just made this trade and we're like, yeah, well, this is the reasoning. I mean, this guy's requesting a trade. I don't think Seattle wanted this at all. So I think they wanted to keep the guy that just the number wasn't there. Man, because he is a physical freak. I mean, he just does everything you want him to do. And that's the thing. I mean, I've never really knocked the guy. Like, yeah, he's not a perfect receiver, but few are. And he blocks, he's physical, he can blow the top off, and he wants to win. I think sometimes people look at those penalties like, oh, he's a hothead, and I'm not saying I don't condone them, but sometimes when you're just that competitor and yes, channel the energy maybe a different way, but he just wants, he's not taking plays off. The guy wants to win at all costs, and sometimes that stuff happens, but you could never look at DK and be like, yeah, this guy's just a lazy guy, or doesn't care. Like he cared. He wants to win. So Seattle, yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how they replace him. JSN's a smaller receiver too, so he's not that Hines Ward, like smaller stature, or Steve Smith. Like, yeah, those guys, like, they were small, but they were, man, they didn't care if you were 6'10". Like, they'll punch you in the face. JSN doesn't have that mentality. I love the dude. I think he's a really good receiver, but you're not going to get that from him. So yeah, they're gonna have to figure this out.
Yeah, let's hope JSN isn't Steve Smith Sr. for wildly different non-football.
Yeah, but
exactly. No kidding.
Aside from that, Steve Smith is my guy. Like that.
Oh, absolutely.
On the field stuff, man. Dude, like, there again, you couldn't find a bigger competitor than Steve Smith. Like, talk about the ultimate dog. So man, I used to. He was my favorite receiver watching when he was in his prime. Man, nobody like him. He was just a freaking beast. So off field stuff like I don't even want to get like we could start talking about Earl's off season stuff too. Like but at the same time,
all right, let's curve this back a little bit, guys. Getting a little off here.
Oh, here we go. Bring your own Bobo.
Bring your own Bobo. BYOB. I like it. It's
he doesn't move up. He's not moving up in the depth chart when we open camp, right? Like
you never know, man. You don't know. Like this is the whole thing. We're in this kind of state of flux now. Like I agree with you. Like I don't necessarily want to see it, and I hope they bring in some legit competition. But it's gonna be interesting. But what I'm gonna say now,
I like the BYOB thing though. That's clever.
Let's actually pivot to what the show is originally supposed to be about. And it was about Lockett's release. That's what initially the show was to be about. And, Mookie, give me your top two. If, I know you probably have tons, but give me your top two Tyler Lockett moments.
Boy, it's hard to pick two, but one of the top two has got to be the toe tap touchdown against the Rams in the 2019 game. It was a Thursday night football game, and it was also the night when Paul Allen got inducted into the Ring of Honor, posthumously, of course. And that was a special game. And Jason in the comments saying the corner catch versus the Rams, that was Russ magic at his best, and also Lockett magic at his best. And that chemistry, it's hard to do. It's hard to replicate it. And that was also a game where I think DK's only catch that night, he burned Marcus Peters for a touchdown. It was rookie DK. So that was, I believe, the first time that both of them had scored touchdowns in the same day. But when it's rough and tumble against the Rams, just a game of inches. I mean, that was one of those fantastic moments. Another one that isn't number one, but is also one of my top two, was just the one against the Carolina Panthers in 2018 when Seattle pretty much had to win to get into to keep their playoff hopes alive. And Wilson was buying time in the pocket, and he found Lockett way down the field, and it was a perfect pass, and Lockett was able to grab it. And because he went down, I think he was down to the 11 or 10-yard line. They had chip shot field goal range. They could run the clock out. Seattle got a massive win that day, and it pretty much put them on the path towards the postseason. But, I mean, the number of games that you could point to, countless, like the Cardinals game in 2020, 15 catches, 200 yards, 3 touchdowns. I know they lost the game, but that was just Lockett in total beast mode. And then he also had the winning touchdown against the 49ers, I think, in the finale that same season. So, yeah, there's so many iconic moments we could think about with Tyler, and it really all started with the punt return touchdown. His second NFL touch was a house call against the then St. Louis Rams, and I think it gets kind of lost to history what a dangerous threat he was on special teams. Somebody we haven't been able to get since then. So unfortunately, D. Williams was not quite the successor to Tyler Lockett. Or really anybody else since Tyler. But like Tyler, those first couple of years when he wasn't like the top option receiver, he was so exciting to watch as a special teams player. And to see him evolve over the years as a special teams guy to wide receiver 3 to clear-cut wide receiver 1, and then kind of aging back out to wide receiver 2 and 3, it's been like a parabola. It's been a fascinating career arc. And I'm going to miss Tyler, man. And I hope that he signs with a contender. So that unfortunately probably means not the Raiders, but I hope he does sign with a contender and gets to make us run at the Super Bowl, because what sucks is he got drafted after the Super Bowl years. So he didn't get to have that success and experience that success that Russ and Doug and all the original Seahawks did from the 2013 and 2014 teams.
So one of my favorite plays was from Tyler's rookie year, and it was in the Minnesota playoff game when it was freezing and the ball goes over Russ's head. It was the first time you could see Russ and Tyler really were on the same page in scramble drills. And he just found the soft spot, sat there. Russ flips it to him, and he takes it all the way down to like the 2-yard line in that game and allows us to get the touchdown to Baldwin, which inevitably got us in a win in that game and got us to Carolina. With Tyler, there's things he did that were on the field that were just so unbelievable for given his size, given what he was brought into the league to be. Like you said, Mookie, he was brought in to be a returner. That was the main focus of Tyler Lockett. The other thing for me that stood out with Tyler was when Quandre Diggs broke his ankle. and he stayed behind and didn't go on the team plane and stayed with his buddy while he was in the hospital there. That was just Tyler. That's who Tyler is. And that's the one thing you never had to worry about with Tyler Lockett was there going to be some sort of thing to come out in the media about Tyler? He was just such a guy that you could be proud of as an organization and say, this is one of our guys. Like what he did in the community, how he was at training camp practices, and all the extra things he did. That's the thing I think you're almost going to miss most about Tyler, more than what he did on the field, was the stuff he did off the field. And that for me with Tyler is going to be kind of the stuff that I miss. But yeah, no. And the other play, honestly, for me with Tyler that I remember again comes from his rookie year was when they were playing Chicago. And because he had become such a return threat, they ran the fake punt return where he acted like he caught it and fell down, and Sherman had it on the other side of the field and went up the sideline. Those were the things, Tyler's impact on the game and his rookie year alone were huge. So I do agree with you, Mookie. I'd love to see him sign with a contender, and I'd love to see Tyler Lockett get a Super Bowl ring.
Yeah, I mean, so would I. I mean, my recent one was the 2 TDs in New Orleans when Geno just put it on him, a couple like beautiful throws, and that's when we talk about how quickly a guy can really lose his step. That was only a couple of years back, right? And he was still blowing the top off. And father time, and he is getting older. Like he's not old, but receiver wise, yeah, he is. So, but those are like that was awesome, right? That was awesome. So, as far as plays concerned, but yeah, I agree, man. Like just a pillar of in the community with on and off the field. So, yeah, people are gonna miss him here in Seattle, man. I know people are like, okay, he's passed the torch to JSN and. But he's still on the team. So, like, even though he wasn't involved, you're like, yeah, he's still a Seahawk, right? Like, he's still here. And now that you're not going to see him on the field next year, you're going to feel it, right? You might not maybe on a production standpoint because, I think they will figure it out with Kubiak and stuff like that. But just being a Hawk and, he's going to be a guy that's missed. But just like, players past, so many legends that have been here that they're legends, man. They live on. So yeah, and if he continues playing, man, I don't know, man. Raiders could be cool, reunited with Pete and maybe a guy just like Bobby with Quinn, just like, hey, here's a familiar face and help you get going again. And look what happened to Washington. I'm not saying the Raiders are in that same position, but you know what? Only one team wins a ring. So the chances of him going somewhere 1 year and winning a ring, I wouldn't mind seeing him in a Raider uniform and maybe helping out Pete getting going again. And that might be kind of fun. So, but yeah, Tyler Lockett, man, we're going to miss him.
Yeah. I wouldn't rule out the Commanders completely because I know they got Debo and they got McLaurin, but his dad, Kevin Lockett, was also with back in the day.
That would be cool too.
So I don't know if Washington's going to keep Bobby, but I mean, Dan Quinn has got the ties to Tyler. Well, actually, no, he doesn't, because of course Quinn left after 2014. He got there after Quinn went to coach the Falcons, but still, Quinn's going to be close with Pete, and he's competed against Tyler more than enough times when he was a coach of the Falcons and when he was the defensive coordinator with the Cowboys. But nevertheless, another great moment I can think of with Lockett more recently was the Giants game in 2022, because that was a kind of like one of Lockett's worst days, the first 3 quarters. He fumbles the ball inside his own 10-yard line. The Giants get their only touchdown of the day. Drops a wide open touchdown in a way that we have never seen. I think it bounced off his helmet or something. And it was just a terrible, terrible day for Lockett in ways that we've never really seen before. And then they do a double move. I think it's him against Adoree Jackson, and Charles Cross gives Geno enough time with dealing with the Kayvon Thibodeau, give him enough time to step up and throw a perfect pass down the sideline, and Lockett burns Adoree for what was the go-ahead touchdown, and I guess technically speaking, the game-winning touchdown. They added another one after the fact, but that was also, I believe, Geno's first fourth quarter game-winning drive as a Seahawk. So I think that bit was really, really cool.
No, it was, and that's what you're gonna miss. You're gonna miss having that security blanket, which was Tyler Lockett. So, it's just a shame today got overshadowed, because it would have been great to just really dive into the Tyler thing. But obviously, the DK news took center stage. Got a couple more comments in on here. So Smith Piled, I think it says, from
Smith
2028. Amari Cooper would make sense on a 1-year deal. Potentially, depends what that 1-year deal looks like. I don't know how Amari would fit in this offense potentially, but it's an option. Like if you need a stopgap or a bridge receiver, Amari Cooper could make some sense. What other ones we just got? Jason comes in with, just got in, but what are the odds they re-sign Tyler, especially with DK leaving? I know JSM put out a post with a crossed fingers and an image of him and Tyler. You never know. Maybe if Seattle doesn't find a solution and they move off DK, but they don't find the right one, maybe Tyler comes back if they don't get a deal, done somewhere else for Tyler. But I think Tyler's probably going to get a deal somewhere. I think either whether it's the Raiders or somewhere that he's got some ties, I think he's going to end up, because I think he thinks he's still worth somewhat of the value of his contract that he had signed. So I think there's a good chance, that ends up happening there. Jason brings in another Tyler moment. Also his game-winning TD in overtime versus Detroit. Yeah, where he touched the pylon running the drag route there. That was another great Tyler moment. So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see how this offseason all, shakes out for Seattle now, Mookie. But I guess we're just going to have to wait and see. And who knows, there may be more news tomorrow. Like, we didn't even touch, like you said earlier, we can touch a little bit here for a few minutes on Ernest Jones, had a knee surgery operation. Doesn't sound like it's a big deal, more of a cleanup procedure, but now there's stuff going out on Twitter of him kind of throwing it looks like a little bit of shade towards Seattle for some reason, or somebody about Seattle. I'm not sure, but yeah, who knows what goes on with Ernest Jones now, because it sounds like they might have put some delays on their contract talks with Seattle.
Yeah, and tomorrow is going to be, Thursday afternoon is going to be John Schneider's radio appearance on 710. Yep. So what's going to be really fun is they're going to, you can't ignore it. So you can't go full ostrich burying head in the sand mode here. So they're going to have to address the DK stuff, and they're going to have to address what's going on with Ernest Jones. And what I expect John to say, as he has with so many other people who have left the Seahawks, the door is still open for a potential reunion. And we've had reunions. We've had Bobby come back, but still, I'm not expecting an immediate reunion. I mean, something we have to consider with Lockett getting released is this is not a post June 1st designation or anything. It's not even a release at the start of the league year. It's a release right now. Like, he's already been listed as released in the transaction wire. He can go sign with another team tomorrow. I think there will be suitors. I don't think there's going to be a high financial value on it. I don't think there's going to be like the $15 million a year, 3-year contract or anything like that. But there are going to be receiver needy teams who value him as a wide receiver 2, a wide receiver 3, who are going to look to sign him. And he might end up signing for a deal that Seattle wasn't comfortable or wouldn't be comfortable signing him to. This might be kind of a youth movement thing where there are a few older players on the team and they just want to kind of a clean break. And this is the opportunity to have a fresh start in some respects.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. And, James comes in here and says Noah Fant likes a comment to go back to Denver over a Seattle comment. There's another guy we haven't even talked about is Noah Fant and what transpires with him. Yeah,
and you notice we hardly talked about the cuts yesterday because none of them was surprising. Like George Fant, no-brainer. Rayshawn, I said on Monday, he's probably going to get cut. There's no trade value for him. And then what was it? Robertson Harris and Draymond Jones. All those were like very, very obvious cuts. So like there's nothing to see here other than, hey, they're under the cap now and they've got room to at least sign some free agents and they got to worry about cap space for draft picks and all that. But Fant's going to be one to watch because he's got a year on his deal and he makes a decent amount of money. So really these next couple of weeks is going to be, is Fant going to stay? Is Geno going to get extended? Is DK going to get traded from now until the draft? And then kind of a distant fourth is what are they going to do with Chenna Nwosu's deal?
Yep.
Are they going to restructure it? Is he going to move on as well? So these next few weeks and how Schneider answers to the questions tomorrow, that's going to give us a lot more clarity about whether or not the Seahawks view 2025 is not blow it all up, because I think this roster is too good to blow it all up, but more of step back and
exactly.
We might end up not being great in 2025, but we're thinking more long-term as opposed to constantly trying to win now, and they're not really coming close to winning now. So at least this announcement would kind of give us the idea that there is a clearer direction to what the franchise is going to be, not just for next year, but in the next couple of years to come.
Agreed. So, guys, we'll get a couple more questions in here, and then we'll wrap it up tonight. So we'll get one here from Metal Dragon, and kind of Mookie to what you were talking about. Does Geno want to re-sign in Seattle now? With everything that's going on, I guess we'll find out soon enough. It could change Geno's mind now who knows what the relationship was like with Geno and DK. I don't think it was the same as it was with Russ and DK, but who knows? Maybe this does change how they evaluate the Geno situation, or how Geno, for a better thought, evaluates whether or not he wants to be in Seattle. And maybe he then goes and says, hey, you know what? There aren't the same weapons here. Maybe I want to move on to somewhere else. Now, I don't think the market's great for Geno to do that, but we've clearly seen stranger things occur. So who knows now? I think the next 3 weeks are going to be very, very interesting in Seattle here and what transpires.
Yeah, if DK moves on and Tyler moves on, because Geno definitely had great chemistry with Lockett too. I mean, the deep ball success rate to Lockett was, I think, a little bit better than he had with DK. So still, I think that they will extend him, but with the plan to draft a quarterback. But if they don't, then buckle up, friends, because this is going to be one hell of a bumpy ride.
No, it definitely will be.
From the live stream, but
yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see what kind of transpires now. So, guys, I think that's going to be it for tonight for us on this show. Mookie, what's going on over at Field Goals? What's some stuff that's obviously going to be coming out down the pipe now?
Well, we are probably going to do the salary cap angle of trading Metcalf, because if he gets dealt, there's no way around it. There's going to be quite a bit of dead money taken on again. So we're done paying Jamal and Quandre, and now we're on to dead money for DK. But beyond that, maybe some more draft coverage talk and just a preview of what's going to happen with free agency, because next Monday is the legal tampering unofficial start to free agency, and then Wednesday the actual start of free agency, the real part where everything gets signed, and then Schefter and Rappaport and Pelissero, they're all going to go something verbally agreed. All the stuff they've had in the pipeline, they can just release like it's sewage going into a river. And yeah, we'll be on top of that. We'll probably have another emergency pod, I'm sure, at this rate, because just March is that time of year where crazy stuff happens in Seattle. And maybe the craziest bits would be the Seahawks spending a whole lot of money on an offensive lineman. At that point, we would have to do like a state of emergency.
Yeah, that would be definitely a state of emergency. For sure.
Like, oh my goodness, they've actually done it.
Yeah, no kidding. And they actually spent it on someone that's worth it. So yeah, no, that all sounds great, Mookie. I know over here tomorrow I've got my draft show. We're going to do our mock draft Monday, but it's on a Thursday. I'm going to have Michael Thompson and Brandon Kane from the Hawk Nest both joining me on tomorrow's show. We're going to dive, obviously, if there's any more news, we'll get their feelings on what's occurred. And then we'll get into draft crushes. Who are some guys they really like and they think fit Seattle really well? And then we'll dive into a mock draft, guys. So that'll be live tomorrow. So make sure you're checking on Twitter. Have your notifications turned on for the channel, so when it goes live, you guys can jump in and be a part of that show. Other than that, guys, make sure, we've got almost 2,000 people watching, which we greatly appreciate. Make sure, guys, sub to the channel. Hit the notification button. If you want to become a member of the show, there's a membership program down below. You guys are able to get special perks too. And also, we are a part of Field Goals now, so all of our podcasts and that will be posted up on the Field Goal page if you guys are over there and want to take a look at it, along with all the other great stuff that gets produced over on the Field Goal site. So for me and for Mookie, thanks, everybody, and have a good night.